Mike Phillips down here at Autogeek Show Car Garage, and today I want to share some tips and techniques for buffing out some of the more complex panels on a car. Now a lot of times the trunk and the deck lid will be fairly flat and easy to buff out, but this Porsche I have here actually lends itself well for a demo because it's got a lot of complex concave and convex curves, plus some hard body lines and plenty of trim that you got to watch out for. So I want to share some tips and techniques for how to tackle the different areas of a car like this. One of the first things we want to do though is we want to take a look at different size of backing pads and backing plates as well as tools, and you want to match the right pad to the panel you're trying to buff out. So come on in, let's take a look at some of the different pads I have set out here to tackle this car. Now I've got 4 different tools laid out here to help me tackle this Porsche today. I have 1 rotary buffer and 3 DA polishers. Now when I say DA polisher, that means dual action, and that means not only does the pad rotate in a circle, but it oscillates inside that circle at the same time. Of course the rotary just rotates in a circle. Now back here in the very corner, I've got the Griot's Garage 3-inch mini polisher. I have it set up with a 3-inch polishing pad, and this is for small thin panels or tight areas where if I can, I'd rather work by machine than work by hand. Next to it I got the Porter Cable 7424 XP. This is a really powerful DA polisher, and I've got a 3.5-inch backing plate on it, and what it's for is for when I want to use a 4-inch pad, okay, so like the CCS or the Hydrotex right here. Up here I've got the Griot's Garage. This is again, it's a DA polisher. It's a fairly powerful tool. It's very safe to use, and I've got a 5-inch backing plate on it. And what I'm going to use it for is anytime I need a 5.5-inch pad. And I've got the Hydrotex, the flat pads, and the CCS up here. And then of course up here I've got the brand new Flex rotary buffer. This is the P14. Now this is a variable speed rotary buffer. It starts at 400 RPM on the trigger. When you lock it into place it goes up to 600, but that's still really low, and it gives you really good control, especially if you're working in small, thin, tight areas where you want to be very, very careful. Now I've also got some hand applicator pads set up because there's some places on this Porsche where you just really can't safely work by machine. So I've got a couple different hand applicator pads, and for the really thin tight areas I've actually taken and cut some up into small chunks, and you'll see this on the louvered area. Anyway, these are the tools I'm going to be using, so let me go ahead and set up and we'll start tackling some of the panels on this car. So let's talk about proper technique just for a second. Whenever you're using a DA polisher, because it has what's called a free floating spindle assembly, that means this will spin on its own, it's not engaged directly to the motor. It's important to always hold the pad flat whenever you can to a flat surface, and to learn how to roll the body of the tool when you're buffing out a curved panel. And here's why. When you're holding the pad on a flat panel and you're holding the tool correctly, 100% of the pad is in contact with the paint. And as long as you have equal pressure over the entire surface of the pad, because you're not holding it at an angle, the pad will rotate and you'll remove the swirls and scratches. Now when you come up to a curve like this, all of a sudden there's an air gap here. Okay, there's nothing touching the bottom of the paint here or on this side, and what that means is you're going to have more pressure running down the center of this pad because of the curve here, and it's this extra pressure on the face of on the center section of this pad that's enough to actually stop the pad from rotating. So you're going to stop removing swirls. So it's important whenever you're machine polishing to hold the tool in a way that you can adjust it and rotate the tool in a way to match the curve of the panel, and then match the pad size to the panel you're polishing. Sometimes you're going to want to shrink down to a smaller pad. Sometimes you're going to turn your speed up and max it out to keep that pad rotating. So it's important to focus on the task at hand for the panel that you're working on. When I tackle the roof of this Porsche, one of the things I want to do is I want to come up here and I want to pull the scratches that I see on the panel between the windshield and the sunroof, okay? Now to do that I'm going to need a small pad because it gets real thin right in here, and it's fairly thin all the way across. So I'm going to use this 3-inch pad for that. Now in order to use this, normally you would use a small backing plate that matches the pad you're going to use, and you'd attach that right to your rotary buffer. But here's a tip. This is something I like to do. They make a tool called an extension. This is usually used for a double-sided pad, and that's how you'd attach a double-sided pad to a rotary. But when I'm using small pads like this, I take and attach that to my backing plate. Then I put this on the rotary, put it right there on the spindle, hit the lock button, tighten that down, and look how far this is going to get my buffer away from the panel. It's going to make it easier for my eyes to see what I'm doing. Now the next thing you want to do is you want to take and put your pad on, and you want to get this centered up as best as you can. And that helps you to avoid putting swirls into the paint. Just like that. Now, I'm going to take a nylon brush, and even though this pad is brand new, I always like to draw it right across the top there just to make sure there's no particulates that got on there, and it might put swirls in the paint also. To do that, you just draw that nylon brush right across there, hit the sides. Now I know my pad is clean. I've already wiped the car down and clayed it, so I know it's clean, so now I'm ready to start working on it. Now this pad is brand new, so it's dry, and instead of bringing a dry pad right down here onto the paint, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Wolfgang Total Swirl Remover. Shake this up first, and I'm actually going to come down here and I'm going to pre-wet or prime the pad. Okay, I'm just going to do this real lightly, and I'm going to put some on the edges here just a little bit too. I'm going to just take my finger and I'm going to work this in, and this just keeps you from bringing dry foam spitting against paint, and you just want to make sure it's lubricated, especially with the rotary. Okay. Now I'm going to lay down a little bead of product right through here. I'm going to pick it up using the 10 to 10 technique. Notice my cord is over my shoulder. As soon as I pick up the bead, I'm going to lay it down flat. Okay, after making a few passes to this section, turn the polisher off, come back with the clean microfiber, carefully wipe that residue off, and inspect your work. And if the scratches are gone, you can move on to a new area. If they're still there, then you want to clean your pad, add some fresh product, and rebuff again. Okay, so this section is good to go. I'm going to go ahead and move to another section. The next thing I do to this area is I switch to a polishing pad, switch over to the finishing glaze, and then polish it out, and then it'll be ready for wax when I'm done with the car. So let's go ahead and move on to a new section. Now I want to show you how I tackle a curved area that's real tight down here around the headlights. Now to do this, the first thing you want to do is always take and mark your backing plates like I've done here. The reason for this is the only time you're really effectively removing swirls is when this pad is rotating. And a lot of times when you get into a tight corner like this and you get pressure just on one part of the pad, it'll stop this from rotating. So you want to make sure the entire time you're trying to remove swirls, you're keeping good pad rotation going on. Now to do this, I've got this on the 6th setting. That's pretty high. Listen to this. That's pretty high, and again, it's because when I get down to these curved areas, it's going to start putting some pressure on just edges of the pad. That's going to want to tend to stop it from rotating, so I'm going to want to bump that speed up just for that. Now I'm using a CCS white polishing pad, and it's brand new and it's dry, so before I use it, I want to go ahead and prime it, so the entire face is going to work for me as soon as I turn the machine on. So let me go ahead and do that first. Just take your finger, spread this around. There we go. Now it's 100% of the face is going to go to work for me as soon as I start to turn the machine on. I'm going to put a couple more drops down here, just a couple pea-sized drops. Okay, and I've got this all taped off, so the gasket's taped off, there's a gasket down here taped off, and this is pebble texture trim, this taped off, but I'm still going to try to avoid getting on top of it. Always throw the cord over your shoulder so you don't drag it against the paint. Don't turn this on until it's in contact with the paint. Then what you want to do is you want to start coming down here. I'm going to knock out this as best as I can. And there may be some areas that are real tight down here where I might have to come back and just by hand work on those if I can't get the polisher in there and keep that pad rotating. Then I'm going to come up around this area right here. I'm going to start working on this curved area, the headlight and the fender right there. Again, don't lift the pad off till you turn the machine off. It'll keep you from throwing splatter everywhere. Now I'm going to come down here and wipe this off. And notice I'm just tackling small sections at a time. And when you have to work these complicated areas that have a lot of curves, you actually don't want to be trying to tackle too big an area at one time. Now that I knocked out this real tight little area down here with a 4-inch pad, I'm going to knock out the rest of the fender here. Even though it's curved, it's going to be a lot easier to buff out using a 5.5-inch Lake Country white foam polishing pad. And again, I'm going to use the Wolfgang Total Swirl Mover. And I've already marked my backing plate here with a black permanent marker. That way I can make sure the pad's rotating, because it's only when the pad's rotating you're effectively removing swirls. Now since this pad is brand new, I'm going to apply some product, take my finger and just spread this in, and this is going to prime it. And what this does is it makes sure 100% of the pad is going to work for you at the very beginning. And because I'm going to be holding this on an angle and there's some painted area down here, I actually want to put some on the edge. And that way the edge can be doing some work for me too. Plus I don't want dry foam rubbing against the paint down there. So just squeeze some of this out. Then just take my finger and work this in. And that'll lubricate it, and it'll help to remove swirls out from the paint in that area. Okay, then to actually do the work, I'm going to put 3 little drops of product on there like that. And I'm going to be running this probably around the 5. This is a fairly powerful DA polisher, but to spread the product out first, I'm going to slow it down, spread it out, then I'll turn it off, bring my speed up, then I'll start working the panel. And I'm going to use overlapping passes, going a couple different directions. And the key thing about working a curved panel like this is you got to practice keeping that pad flat. In order to do that, you got to rotate the tool to match the curve of the panel. So that's something that comes with experience, but you just can't hold it on a certain plane or your pad will stop rotating. So let me bump this down. I'll take and don't turn this on until it's in contact with the paint. Spread my product out, turn it off, bring my speed up, then finish polishing out this fender. Okay, and if you look, I've tackled a section here about 1.5 feet wide, and then I'm going all the way down to the tape line and coming back up just past the top of the fender. You can't tackle too much at one time because you want to effectively work that product over the swirls that you're trying to remove. Now I'm going to bump this back up. I'm going to be right at the 5.5 because this thing's pretty powerful actually. Okay, and again, turn the polisher off before you lift the pad off. Keeps you from throwing splatter everywhere. You do that one time, start spending all your time wiping splatter off, you'll never do it again. Now, if you noticed, I was going in two different directions. I went from side to side, kind of front to back there, and that's for what we call uniform material removal. And that ensures that I take an even amount of swirls out of the entire section there, so it has a uniform appearance when we go to put the wax on later on after final polishing. Now, you never need to let a product like this dry, so just take a microfiber and gently wipe it off. Again, you can inspect it. If it looks good, you can move on. If you still see swirls and scratches, you can give it a second application. You could always jump up to a more aggressive pad if you wanted to. A lot of times, especially on a car like this, if you want to just work carefully, just always use the least aggressive product to get the job done. And that looks beautiful. Anyway, that's how I'd use a 5.5 inch pad to tackle this part of the fender. And then I would just continue working around this fender using the 5.5 inch pad. Okay, for back here on the deck lid, I've already taped this off. Now this has these vents on here, these louvered vents. They're really thin. Now this is an area I'd probably knock out by hand. If you want to be really careful, you could try to do it by machine. The problem is there's a sharp body line on 3 different places on here. So that kind of makes it kind of risky. So that's where a lot of times I'll take something small like this, apply product to it, and just come down here and rub it out by hand. Now the Wolfgang Total Swirl Remover uses diminishing abrasives, so you can in fact remove swirls and scratches by hand. It just takes a little more time as compared to working by machine. Now I've got the 3-inch Grills Garage polishing pad on here on the 3-inch mini polisher. This goes from a speed setting of 1, which is really slow, all the way up to 6. But you're going to want to be on the 6 all the time for moving swirls and scratches, because it doesn't take much to keep this pad from rotating. As you can see, I've marked this, so you're going to be able to tell this rotating, and it really requires that you use good technique the entire time you're using it. That means hold that pad flat, try not to get any high points like a body line. Now again, this pad's dry, so I'm going to take and prime it. Just take my finger and just kind of spread that around, work it into the pad. And again, that makes sure that 100% of your pad is going to work for you as soon as you turn that switch on. And I also want to put a little bit right here on the edges. Okay, just in case the edges hit anything, I want to make sure they're lubricated with product there. There we go. Okay, now that I got my pad primed, I'll go ahead and put a few more little drops right on here. And it's important when using this tool that you use the ample amount of product, not too much, not too little, because it's going to help keep that pad rotating just by being a lubricant. Now I've got enough product on here, I can probably get this whole section here. So I'm going to touch this down, bump this down, and watch how I pick up my product here. Just real slowly spread it out. As I come up to the product, I just tilt this, grab it, trap underneath the pad. Now I'm ready to turn this up. That's the 6th setting. Now I just want to start moving this real slow. Okay, then turn it off before you lift the pad off. Take a microfiber. That was 6 passes, by the way. Notice how slow I was moving that, and the pad was rotating the entire time. And again, that's key to removing the swirls and scratches. I just want to come down here and wipe that off gently. And this section of the deck lid here actually had a lot of really nasty looking swirls and scratches in it. And 6 passes has pulled out probably about 80% of them. The ones that are left are quite a bit deeper, and I'm going to go ahead and hit this again to try to pull those out. But at some point you do want to just say, hey, they're probably too deep to take out safely. Learn to live with them. This is the original paint on this car. I know the owner doesn't want to have to repaint it. So let me just hit this again. Okay, and at this point here I'm just going to wipe off and inspect, and I just wanted to pay attention to how slow I was actually moving the polisher. A lot of times what guys will do is they get a hold of this and they hear that sound. It sounds pretty fast and it for some reason automatically makes them want to do this. That won't do anything. Got to move it slowly. Okay, let's come down here and wipe this off. And I'd say after 2 passes, that's looking good enough to go ahead and stop there. The next thing I'll do is I'd switch over to the polishing pad, go to the finishing glaze, finish out this section. It looks like I can probably knock out these areas here to the side, and probably when I get up here I'm going to start switching over to working by hand. Now, when you want to start working on areas that's going to be really hard to get a machine into, it's time to start using your hand skills and work by hand. Here's a couple of different foam applicator pads. This is a CCS foam applicator pad. That stands for collapsed cell structure, and it holds these little pockets here, hold some excess product. This is real nice and thick and dense, and I really like this for working larger panels. This here I like for applying waxes and for thin areas, but when I got to get down here and actually get some really small areas, what I like to do is just I took one of these yellow ones here, took a pair of scissors, just cut it up. I'm going to take the same product I was using by machine. I'm going to take and put some right onto the pad. And this is just going to allow me to come down here and work just right onto the paint itself. Even though I got everything taped off, I want to put all my pressure just right here. That'll look just like this. And of course, this will take you longer. And the lesson to be learned here is don't put scratches into the paint on the hard to polish areas. Don't put scratches anywhere in your paint if you can avoid it, but just be really careful knowing what it takes to get them out. Luckily, these are actually in pretty good shape. They don't see a lot of wear and tear except for wiping down or washing. So I should be able to knock most of this out just by hand pretty quickly. Come back and then polish it. Then I'll apply some wax to it also. Now here's a fairly common place to find scratches. It's right here in the paint behind the door handle, because what happens is you put your hand in here, your fingernails hit the paint and you put scratches in over and over and over again. And it's really hard to get any kind of pad up inside there to effectively remove those types of scratches. So this is again another area where you need to use good hand technique. Now for this I'm just going to use a clean foam applicator pad, and one thing I always tell people is every time you grab one of these, inspect it. Make sure there's no dirt on there. I'm going to use the same product I've been removing swirls by hand. Put a little bit on there. Instead of putting this big old dollop of product right into there, I'm going to take and spread this into the foam just to the end here where I'm mostly going to be working the product. I'm just going to come in here and then just try to knock this all out by hand. And again, this is the Wolfgang Total Swirl Remover, which uses a diminishing abrasive, and it's affected by hand or machine. And it works really well for getting into these tight areas, just like you see right here. And the area like this actually may take 2 or 3 applications, just because it's hard to get to. Now these scratches don't really show up that much on black paint because you got the door handle in the way, it's kind of sheltered. But a lot of times on a lighter colored car, they really stand out like a sore thumb. So this is how you take care of those. Just get in there with a light swirl mark remover or paint cleaner, work those out. Now I'm putting some pretty firm pressure on that too. Then take a clean microfiber towel, come in here and wipe that off and inspect. And if it still doesn't meet your expectations, then just repeat the process till you reach the level of appearance quality that you're looking for. And of course we'll come back and we'll hit this with a light fine polish, and we'll put some wax on there too. That's how you tackle the area right there behind the door handle. Well, there's not a lot of swirls and scratches here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a polishing pad for this. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Hydrotech pads. Now Hydrotechs come in polishing, which is the tangerine, there's a cutting pad in the cyan, and there's a waxing or finishing pad, which is the crimson. And what I want to show you here is what we've got is actually a fairly complex fender here. Right here we've got a concave where it dishes in. Right here we've got a convex curve. Okay, so again, whenever you're polishing out curves like this, unlike a flat panel where you just hold the pad and you don't have to roll the body of the tool at all, for this I'm going to have to roll the body of the tool to keep that pad rotating as I remove the swirls here. Now I've already went ahead and primed my pad, so I'm going to go ahead and shake this up. I always shake a product if it's been standing for a while. Gonna add some product here. And I'm just gonna tackle a section just about 1.5 foot, 2 foot area right here. Before I start, I wanna go ahead and take and turn this down and spread my product out. After I get my product spread out, then I'll bump the speed back up, then I'll start working this, making overlapping passes and pull these swirls out of here. So that'll look just like this. Okay, got my product spread out to the area I'm going to work. I'm going to bump this thing up to the 6th setting. This Grills Garage Polisher has quite a bit of power. Now I've marked my backing pad so you can watch and see that I keep the pad rotating the entire time. It's going to be kind of tricky down here where it's concave because I'm going to have pressure that's going to actually end up being right here and on the other side at the same time when I'm holding it this way. And it's the pressure on the side of the pad that'll tend to want to make it stop rotating. So you want to pay attention to that, and again, roll the body of the tool in order to keep that pad rotating. Okay, now as you notice, I kept rolling the body of the tool, in order to keep that pad rotating. It rotated the entire time. I'm going to come down here, go ahead and wipe this residue off. Then we can inspect our results. If it looks good, then we'll move on. Looks good to me. Anyway, that's how I would tackle a convex and a concave panel next to each other. It's just basically learning to roll this tool to keep that pad rotating. I also use the 5.5-inch packs that fit in there really well. I wouldn't want to go any larger for an area like this. Well, those are some tips and techniques to help you polish out the convex and the concave curves, thin tight panels, and work around areas that you can't even get a machine. For more information on anything you've seen here today, visit Autogeek.net. Or you can always call our customer care hotline. That's at 1-800-869-3011, where our friendly staff is always ready to answer your questions. Don't forget to swing by our fun and friendly discussion forum. That's at Autogeekonline.net. And that's where you'll find me, answering questions and posting new how-to articles. I'm your host, Mike Phillips, and I'll see you on the next edition of Autogeek Show Car Garage. Now, somebody has to finish polishing out the rest of the Porsche, and I guess that's me.